Hey folks, before we begin today's show, I want to thank our awesome sponsors. The first is Idle Academy. Idle is the first and only authorized vocational school for instructional design and online learning. It includes a comprehensive hands-on curriculum with certifications, credentials, expert coaches, mentors, a community of practice, paid experience opportunities, industry-preferred software access, live events, and ongoing updates. Your entire instructional design career is neatly packaged behind a single login. Check out all the details at www.idlecourses.com/academy, and you can use my code Luke for $88 off the yearly membership. I also want to thank Desire to Learn, more commonly known as D2L. Going from one learning management system to another can be an absolute nightmare. Trust me. I've been there. And recently, I had to move all of my courses over to a new learning management system. And luckily for me, I was able to work with the team at D2L to help me with making this transition. And now all of my courses live on Brightspace. It was an easy transition and an easy move. And I found the team to be so helpful to be able to work with. And I now work with them on almost a daily basis for a number of things. If you are thinking of changing learning management systems, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to connect you on over with my contacts over at D2L and to help you with making this process just a little bit easier for you. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't tried out Brightspace yet, you can actually try it for free for 30 days. You can go to the website or go down below inside of the show notes to be able to find that link, and you can see why millions of people love using this learning management system like myself. Okay, let's bring on the introduction music and let's start the show. Hello, learning nerds, and welcome on in to the nerdiest podcast you're going to hear today. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson, and I'm your host of this show. I'm a senior instructional designer, blogger, podcaster, YouTuber, author, and a whole bunch of other things. My passion, my purpose is talking about designing learning experiences and being able to help you when it comes to learning more about how to craft your own, as well as how to be able to make some moves inside of this space from a career perspective, and really helping out from everything in between. And of course, you can find all the resources that I have for you over at drlukehobson.com. For today's episode, I want to talk a bit about learning, but specifically in the power of reflections inside of learning experiences. You see, our society is stuck in this fast-paced go mode where overworking is celebrated, multitasking is expected. You know that one thing that you can't rush, though? That tiny little itty-bitty thing called the learning process. We've all tried it, and I am certainly guilty of this as well. I think back to college, because during those days, procrastination was in my blood, and I seemed to thrive by waiting until the last second to cram as much as possible the night before. Now, to my own surprise, I would do fairly well on these exams that I was cramming for, but if you asked me the same exam questions a week later, I would have no idea. We know that cramming doesn't work, yet when it comes to adult learning, we are still cramming, but in a different way. We don't call it cramming because that's for college students. No, we have upgraded as adults, and instead of cramming for an exam, we are realizing that we have a upcoming deadline to complete a training that we are definitely going to miss soon, or we have to give a presentation, and we're not ready yet, so we're trying to be able to rush on through. If we were asked a week after these events about the content and what we did, sure enough, we would give out blank stares. What if this content truly mattered to us, though? We didn't want to rush it. We genuinely wanted this information to stick for a long period of time. What is something that we can do today to allow for more retention? Well, enter in reflections. For the last several years, I've added reflections into my learning experiences, and they have made a world of a difference for the students. I've seen this from both perspectives, as an instructional designer and an instructor. For my students, I can tell that this is one of the first times that they have experienced a kind of a learning activity that asks them to slow down rather than speed up. And the idea of reflections is quite simple. This learning activity tells students to stop, pause, and think back to what they just learned. It asks them to tie this information back into a former experience of theirs. Maybe the prompt makes sense to have them reflect upon a past situation where the outcome wasn't necessarily ideal. With the information they recently explored, if they could go back in time and do something different, what would they do to improve the situation? This could also be used in a forward facing type of a setting. For instance, if they come into a situation again in the future, well, what will they do differently this next time around? If you go down below into the show notes, you can actually see an example of one of my reflections from the Instructional Design Fundamentals course that's offered over at Instructional Design Institute. This image, if you're not being able to look at your phone right now or to go to the website to be able to see this, I'll try to be able to describe it a bit. This is coming directly from the 5th week of the Fundamentals course, which is talking all about universal design for learning and how to be able to apply these principles. And inside of the reflection question, what it looks like is that the instructions say, exactly word for word, what was your main significant takeaway about UDL? How can you apply these principles to your courses? There is no maximum or minimum word length. Write however much you feel is necessary. This example isn't groundbreaking or anything overly complicated. I simply want the students to reflect back on the teachings for the week and to write down what stood out to them. And really, that's the beauty of reflection questions. These allow for students to think about their own learning journey, what was important to them, and then to write everything down. So let's explore a bit more about the science behind this and why reflections really work so well. First, from an andragogical perspective, this is taking into consideration the research from Dr. Malcolm Knowles and what we know about his 6 principles. One of these principles is centered around incorporating past experiences. As educators, we should be taking these into consideration when designing learning experiences. Adults come with a wealth of knowledge, and we are not simply wiping the slate clean every single time. By taking into consideration what they have already gone through, the reflections can make them think back to those moments in time and further solidify the new ideas that they've just explored. This type of learning activity also aids in relevancy, another one of the principles. It's incredibly difficult to know where every student is coming from with their various backgrounds, but if our prompts can engage them to connect the real world into their learning process, then this is going to be a win for everyone. The second idea of incorporating learning sciences into this is talking about spaced repetition. It's a bit of an odd form of spaced repetition, so hang in there with me for a second while I explain a bit more about this. The spacing effect is the concept that shows how learning is more effective when spaced out over a period of time. Essentially, it is the opposite of cramming. Instead of taking a sprint-like approach to learning, students are taking the slow and steady approach. This concept has shown through research to enhance long-term memory retention, and this all dates back to the work of Hermann Ebbinghaus in the 1880s with the discovery of the forgetting curve. If you haven't heard of this before, the forgetting curve highlights that we forget the information we learn over a period of time. As more time passes, the more we forget. However, we can overcome this by intentionally reviewing the information at different points of time. When students are trying to actively recall what they've learned at a later date, this only strengthens the memory trace each time. If you've heard of some of the past episodes about how I prepared and study for my comps for my dissertation, for my doctoral program, this is exactly what I did, of being able to intentionally try to review information, to be able to actively recall, to wait it out over a couple period of days, perhaps 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, then to repeat the process again and again and again, and meanwhile trying to be able to test as far as for with more information, trying to write more things down with each passing moment and to not expose myself as much to the content. Again, trying to be able to review things. That was one thing that I used that drastically helped me out when being able to essentially memorize page after page after page. But certainly for reflections, this absolutely applies as well. After teaching online courses for the last decade or so, I notice a pattern with how students spend their time in my courses. My modules open up on Mondays for the start of the week, and almost all of my students log into the course on that Monday and begin to go through the learning experience. They tend to go through the learning material first and will complete one of the learning activities. Then they take a break and revisit the course a few days later. That is when they move on to more learning material, completing the assessment, and then finishing the module with the reflection question. My reflection questions are always at the end of the module. Inadvertently, this is allowing the information they have learned to marinate for a few days, and then trying to recall what they've learned about for that Sunday night deadline. One of the most common reflection questions I ask is, what were your most significant takeaways for the week? This makes the students think back to all the main points and then to recall this information. Could they go back and review the material? Absolutely. Do plenty of them write down what they remember from memory alone? Absolutely. By having all of this take place within the week, an organic process and flow happens. They don't realize that they are following best learning practices, but this is a powerful method for retention. I also said a few moments ago that this happens, quote unquote, inadvertently, because when I started creating reflection questions, it just seemed natural to me to put these at the end of the module. I wasn't expecting students to log into my course over multiple days to maximize the spacing effects, but that's exactly what happened. And I'm going to make a fair, educated assumption that this might be happening inside of your courses right now. The reflections that I create are typically not graded, and this was done with intention. Because of the fact they're still required, so people will still partake and actually do these, but I want to be able to take off that type of pressure when it comes to having formally evaluated types of assignments, so hence not having this be graded. I also try to give broad guidelines for the submission length, and I will typically say, write down what you feel is appropriate. I'm always surprised to see that students will submit far more information than I expected on these reflections because they're enjoying this type of activity, so they want to be able to write more. I also think that the relaxed nature and setup of the prompt aids in this writing process because they know that they're not going to be graded or evaluated harshly, but instead the instructor is going to be reading this and trying to be able to learn more about their past experiences. I'm not going to evaluate the students based on a word count or how many references they use for this type of activity. This learning activity is for their purpose, and it's trying to be able to draw upon their own experiences. Students, especially adult students, want more autonomy and flexibility. So adding in reflections into your learning experiences will absolutely help with this. So here is the good news. Reflection questions aren't hard or time-consuming to create. You can literally use the language that I mentioned about in this podcast episode to be able to take these and to add them into your courses today. Of course, these should always be intentional. They should serve a purpose. Remember, adults are smart and they are going to be very quick to pick up on extremely obvious repetitive patterns. So there should be a rhyme and a reason for why you are doing something. Use your own creativity and experiment with reflections. I promise that these will make a significant difference for your students and for levels of retention. Folks, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you know what I'm going to say. Please be sure to leave a review for this podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you are listening. Of course, feel free to tag your colleagues and to share this with a friend because sharing is caring. So be a friend and tell a friend about this podcast. If you would like for me to cover a new topic, please feel free. You can always write to me as well over at luke@drlukehobson.com. Had a few ideas come from some of you over the last couple of months, and certainly this does help me when it comes to being able to think about topics and what you want to learn more about. Certainly, learning science seems to definitely be one of them. The other one is talking about more of learning strategies, trying to be able to add more into learning experiences to truly make them meaningful, relevant, and interesting for your folks. And by all means, happy to do that and happy to bring on guests who know a thing or two about a thing or two inside of these areas. And be sure to stay tuned because the next cohort, the 5th cohort for Instructional Design Institute with the course about instructional design fundamentals is going to be coming up again. I am waiting on one more date before I can actually announce about what the official date is going to be. I have a million events coming up over the next couple of months. Once again, the summer, by the way, the summer is never a time when I am not going to be busy. The summer is when I am 24/7 having all these different forms of events and conferences, and day job is going bananas and everything else. So a lot of things are happening behind the scenes, and I'm still trying to make all of them work. And I keep on hearing from some of you about when is the next cohort date for the next launch of IDI. It is going to be happening soon, so please stay tight a little bit longer, and hopefully I will be able to get that information for you very quickly. Folks, that is all I have for you today. Stay nerdy out there, and I'll talk to you next time.